Across the deserts of northern China, vast herds of camels are released to roam free over some of the deadliest land on Earth. Animals numbering into the millions across the wider region, set loose where 50-degree heat and water, saltier than the sea, kill almost everything else alive. By every rule we know, they should be dying out there. Instead, they are thriving, in numbers that stretch to the horizon. And when scientists finally went to find out why, one of these camels turned out to do something that, even now, no researcher on Earth can fully explain. To understand why anyone would be standing in a place like that, you first have to understand the ground itself. China holds some of the most extreme deserts on Earth. The largest is the Taklamakan, sprawling across roughly 337,000 square kilometers of the Xinjiang region. It is the second largest shifting sand desert in the world, and it terrified the old caravan travelers so badly that its name became a warning about a place you walk into and never walk back out of. To the north rises the Badin Jaran, home to some of the tallest sand dunes found anywhere on Earth, standing like frozen mountains hundreds of meters high. And there is the Tengger, another vast, restless sea of moving sand. Out here, the air can climb past 50 degrees Celsius. Rain barely falls, sometimes for years at a stretch. The dunes themselves are alive in their own slow way, marching across the land grain by grain, and the wind that drives them almost never stops. Nothing about this place was built to keep things alive. For cattle, for sheep, for any ordinary grazing herd, this is simply a slow death sentence, because the plant life is too thin, too tough, too salty, and spaced too far apart to keep them alive. So, here's the question that should already be nagging at you. If this ground kills almost everything we try to raise on it, why on earth would anyone deliberately turn animals loose out here by the thousands? The answer is a single animal. Here is the thing most people get wrong about the camel. It is not just a tougher version of a horse or a cow. It is built, almost from the feet up, for a world with nearly nothing in it. It can cross enormous distances between one meal and the next, and between one drink and the next. It can live on vegetation so sparse and so thorny that every other grazer walks straight past it.
Carrying loads in a caravan, they can go for 12 to 13, 14 days without water.
It shrugs off temperature swings that would kill a softer animal, baking days and freezing nights in the very same skin. Its nostrils seal shut against blowing sand. Its eyes hide behind a double row of long, thick lashes. And those famous humps are not water tanks, despite what you were probably told as a kid. They store fat, a portable fuel reserve the animal burns through when there is genuinely nothing left to eat. Everything about this creature, from its eyelashes to its stomach, is an answer to scarcity. Think about what that really means for a second. Most animals are only ever visitors in a desert, passing through and praying they reach the far side before it takes them. The camel is not a visitor. The desert is simply where it lives, and it is in no hurry at all to leave. While every other kind of livestock needs the land to feed it, the camel takes a landscape that offers almost nothing and makes a living anyway. Which is exactly why, across northern China, people do not fence these animals in at all. One quick thing. And if you are already wondering how on earth an animal pulls that off, do me a quick favor and hit subscribe right now. Because the part coming up next about what happened when scientists actually started studying these herds up close is where this whole story tips over into something you will not expect. Across Xinjiang and Inner Mongolia, China is home to staggering numbers of domesticated Bactrian camels, the sturdy two-humped kind. Worldwide, that population runs into the millions, and almost every one of them lives and works alongside people. But here is what surprises outsiders. They are not kept locked up. For much of the year, herders release them to range free across open desert and semi-desert, then move with them as the seasons turn. The numbers in a single place can be hard to believe. In Kalpan County, right on the rim of the Taklamakan, footage has captured something close to 15,000 mother camels setting off together on their winter migration, a slow, living river of animals stretching all the way to the horizon. Up in the camel heartland of northern Xinjiang, tens of thousands more spread across the dry country, And the regional camel milk industry alone draws from herds that together total well over 100,000 animals. So the title is true in the most literal way. Animals released by the herd into one of the deadliest landscapes on Earth, which raises the obvious question. Out there, on ground that starves a cow within days, what are all of these camels actually eating? This is the part that first made researchers sit up. When they looked closely at what these camels pull out of the landscape, they found the animals thriving on exactly the plants that almost everything else refuses to touch. Camels browse woody shrubs. They strip away thorny, spiny growth that would shred another animal's mouth. And here is the strange one. They go after the salty. Halophytic plants, the ones that grow straight out of salt-loaded soil, are basically poison to a cow or a sheep. The camel treats them like a buffet. Think about what that does to the math of an entire region. Where another grazer would starve standing in the middle of a meal it physically cannot eat, the camel walks the same ground and finds dinner everywhere it looks. A single herd can keep a whole economy moving, milk and wool and meat and transport, across terrain that should support almost no life at all. But there is an animal out here that takes all of this much further than any domestic herd ever could. It belongs to no one. It answers to no herder. And the first scientists who studied it were convinced they were looking at something that should not exist.
Of wool hair to protect it in the very cold minus 40 degrees in the winter. Because wool doesn't weigh very much, as you understand.
For a long time, everyone assumed it was just domestic camels gone feral, runaways that had drifted back into the wild. Then a team of geneticists in Vienna ran the DNA. For years, that feral runaway story had gone almost entirely unquestioned, and the result that came back quietly tore it apart. Picture the moment the comparison finally came up on the screen in that lab. The wild camel, Camelus ferus, was not a feral domestic animal at all. It was a separate species, one that had branched away from its domestic cousin somewhere between 700,000 and well over 1 million years ago.
You will have known from the domestic Bactrian that when it is tired, the humps flop when they've used up their fat. That never happens with the wild camel. The pointed humps always stays the same.
The numbers were stark. Their DNA differs from the domestic camel by around 3%. For comparison, the gap between humans and chimpanzees is only about 1%. Let that sit for a second. These two camels look almost identical, and yet they are further apart from each other than we are from chimps. And this ghost species is barely hanging on. Only around 1,000 are thought to remain on the entire planet, scattered across a few isolated pockets of northwest China and southwest Mongolia, most of them clinging to the salt basin of Lop Nur. What this animal can do out there is the single most remarkable fact in this whole story. Think back to the very start, to that water saltier than the sea. When there is no fresh water anywhere, the wild camel drinks it. A human cannot survive that. Even the domestic camel cannot tolerate it. But this animal takes in brine that would dehydrate and poison almost anything alive, processes it somehow, and just keeps walking. And here is the part nobody fully understands. Scientists still cannot explain how it does it. The exact mechanism, how the body pulls usable water out of brine and offloads all of that salt, remains an open question to this day. It is one of the genuinely unsolved puzzles in desert biology, sitting right there in plain sight. Then it gets stranger. Part of the wild camel's range at Lop Nur spent decades as China's atmospheric nuclear test site. The camels did not leave. They lived through dozens of nuclear tests across that region and went right on breeding naturally in the fallout. Think about the kind of animal we are describing here. It drinks poison, it walks across an old nuclear proving ground, and it does both without blinking. So, if you are a scientist, the obvious next move is to follow it everywhere it goes. The problem is that following a creature like this is almost impossible. So, how do you study an animal that lives in a place that very nearly kills people? You stop trying to follow it on foot. Today, researchers fit camels with satellite and GPS collars that report their position day after day, mapping migration routes no one could ever have walked. They send drones over terrain far too vast and too dangerous to cross by hand. And somewhere far from the dunes, a remote sensing specialist at the Chinese Academy of Sciences sits in front of a screen, watching faint points crawl across a satellite map of the emptiest land in China, tracing exactly where the rare wild camels roam, where they find water, and what threatens them. Each collar pings its position once a day, and over months, those points draw out the map of a life almost no human has ever watched up close. Here is what gets me about that image. One person at a monitor, hundreds of miles away, quietly learning the secret travel routes of one of the last 1,000 wild camels on Earth. And the questions driving all of that effort are not really about the past. They are about what is coming next. Because while scientists study how these animals endure, the people of the desert have been fighting a very different battle on the surface, one that you can actually see from space. For decades, these deserts have been spreading, swallowing pasture and pushing up against towns, and China has thrown staggering resources at stopping them. The most dramatic result landed in late 2024. Back in 1978, the country launched a vast tree planting campaign, and more than 40 years later, crews finally planted the last stretch of a green belt that now completely encircles the Taklamakan Desert. Picture a living wall of trees and shrubs, desert poplar and saxaul and red willow, stitched together with solar-powered sand-blocking technology, running for more than 3,000 kilometers around the desert's entire edge. It has been described as the longest green barrier ever built around any desert on Earth. Now, here is where I have to be straight with you. That belt did not turn the desert into a forest, and experts still argue over how much it truly tames the sandstorms. It is a wall at the margins, not a cure for the dead core. But it tells you something undeniable. At the edge of the deadliest sand on the planet, people are not backing away. They are digging in, planting, and staying. And the camels are woven right into how they manage to do it, which leaves one last question worth sitting with. So here is where all of this finally lands. The thing that shocked the scientists was never that camels could survive China's deserts, because people have known that for 1,000 years and built whole livelihoods on top of it. The real shock was just how completely these animals master a place that defeats nearly every other large creature alive. Herds of thousands turning salt and thorns into milk and wool. A single rare species out at Lop Nur, drinking water saltier than the sea. Breeding on old nuclear ground, doing things no one can yet explain. The surprise was never survival. The surprise was how astonishingly good they are at it, and the growing suspicion among researchers that these animals hold real lessons about how life hangs on in the harshest corners of a warming world. The camel did not conquer the desert. It did something far stranger. It learned to belong there. If stories about animals that quietly break the rules of survival are your kind of thing, subscribe and stick around, because I have got a lot more of them coming. And before you go, I genuinely want your answer to this. If you could engineer one single animal to dominate any extreme on Earth, burning desert, polar ice, or the crushing deep sea, which one would you build? And what single ability would you give it? Drop it down in the comments. I read them.